in an arena with thousands of people watching and on TV with millions at home watching, there's something about anyone who has the courage, particularly for these people who aren't professional athletes. For the most of them, they have families and jobs, and they're doing this once a year. They're putting themselves out there, and I just have so much respect for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for another exciting episode of Mick Unplugged, and today we have someone who's a personal hero of mine. We're talking about a guy that's going from Ivy League MD to an Emmy-winning comedian, cancer survivor, arthritis warrior, and the soul of American Ninja Warrior. He redefines resilience, elevates grit, and inspires transformation. Join me in welcoming my hero, Mr. Matt Iseman. Matt, how you doing today,
Mick,
brother?
You are too good. You're making my ego huge here. The soul of American Ninja Warrior. That's got to go on my business card, man. That's very kind.
I mean it in every stretch of the imagination, man. Matt, I told you you're my hero. I want to tell you why. So, rheumatoid arthritis personally affects my family. What you do for the foundations that you're a part of, man, like truly have helped me bring awareness to my communities, to the clients that I represent, that I work with. And so I just want to thank you because we are so much now aware of rheumatoid and the foundations and the work that's being done. And with you being the front runner of that, man, being a key voice of that, I just have to thank you, bro.
You're very kind. I feel very lucky. So for those who don't know, I have rheumatoid arthritis, as you mentioned. And what's interesting is for me, the reason I got so involved is my background is I'm a medical doctor, as you mentioned. And when I was diagnosed, first of all, it took 1.5 years to get diagnosed, 1.5 years where my body was falling apart and really my life was falling apart physically. I gained 50 pounds. I was unable to work out. I had stiffness in my neck, my back, pain in my hands and my feet. I mean, my life, I became a shell of myself. Yeah. And I was going to doctors. I was being tested for things, rheumatologic conditions like RA, and nothing was coming back positive. And the doctor said everything's normal, even though I knew something's wrong. And it took 1.5 years before I got the diagnosis. And when I got diagnosed and was told I had RA, the thing was, first of all, I was relieved, not because I wanted. RA is a chronic autoimmune disease. There is no cure. Obviously, you don't want that, but I just wanted an answer because, for anyone out there who's experiencing health issues, one of the most challenging parts is when you don't know why, when there's no answer. Because even if it's a bad answer, even if it's cancer, even if it's a chronic disease and there's no cure, at least you know what you're up against instead of just kind of facing like you're in a room blindfolded and you just keep getting hit. And so, but the crazy thing was once I was diagnosed as a doctor, my dad's a doctor, my friends were doctors, I was surrounded by good doctors. I understood the disease. I understood the pathophysiology of it. But what I didn't know was how do you live with it? And so for me, when I got diagnosed, the crazy thing was, even though I was surrounded by all these people wanting to help, I felt alone until I went to a meeting with the Arthritis Foundation. And all of a sudden, I'm in a room full of people like me, a room full of people facing the same disease or a similar disease, people who could tell me, hey, this is how I cope with this day to day. These are some of the strategies I cope with. Yeah. These are some of the things like you can have kids still, you can have a job. There are challenges, but here's what they are. And to me, what it was the reason I've become so supportive of the Arthritis Foundation in particular was they were my family when I was diagnosed with this disease. And not that my other family wasn't there, but the family of people who knew what I was going through. And for anyone who's experienced a challenge, and I don't think it's limited to just health challenges, but it's so helpful to have someone who's walked a mile in your shoes and who can understand what you're going through and who can give you the real practical advice and sometimes just be there to say, yeah, it sucks. That's okay. It sucks.
Dude, you were so true, man. Like, so my grandmother had it before she passed. My mom has it. My sister has it. I have an uncle or actually 2 uncles that have it. And I don't think people understand what you just said. Just that community of, hey, I'm here with you.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what you need because the pain that could just hit you at 1:00 in the morning. Like, I mean, my mom sometimes has to sleep sitting up in a chair just because when she gets that flare up, like you said, like there's not much that you can do. Like there's some things to ease it, but it doesn't go away. And then my sister, just to walk up and down stairs sometimes can be a struggle. My uncle, who's one of the strongest men that I know, is like, I can't use a screwdriver
Yeah.
right now. Like, can you come over and help me? But I get it. And I don't think people understand like just that dynamic of the disease and of the illness, man. Like, how did you begin coping with it on both the mental and the physical
So
side?
I think there were a couple things that happened um, that happened pretty quickly. I think the first thing was by finding that community and seeing people living with it. Because again,
Yeah.
when you read the textbook, when you search online, the majority of the cases you find are the worst case scenarios. You're seeing people completely confined to wheelchairs, people with the gnarled hands. But the reality is, for most people living with RA, a lot of times it's what's called an invisible disease, where people look
Mm,
at you and they can't tell anything's wrong. But when they
right.
see, my friend, I was 30 years old, and I went from like a 197 pounds to almost 250 pounds. I couldn't move. And my buddy looked at me and he's like, "What's wrong with you? There's something wrong." And
Right.
I think for me was finding that community of people who could tell me it's okay. There's a way
Yeah.
through this. There's a bright side, and we're a living
Yeah.
proof of it. That was important. But the other thing was, at that point I was doing stand-up comedy. And for
Mm,
me, that age-old truism, laughter is the best medicine. I think for me, that even in that 18 months when I didn't have a diagnosis, but I was really struggling physically and even
mm,
emotionally, where I was probably clinically depressed by the final few months, where you're just so devastated, sleeping 10 to 14 hours a day and still feeling exhausted. I think for me, the highlight of every day was going to a comedy club. And even if nobody laughed at my jokes, it's being around a room of laughter. It's that thing of when you're laughing, you're not thinking about the pain, you're not thinking about the sadness. And so
yeah.
for me, laughter was I think, such a good tool to help cope with the struggles of it. And I was very fortunate. I started on a biologic drug, which those were only approved in 98. I was diagnosed in 2002. And I'm sure, as certainly your mom knows, and maybe even your sister, before those biologics, the treatments were things like heavy metals. And very often the side effects of the treatments were as bad as the disease. And
Yeah.
so it was a real catch 22. And I've been very fortunate where I've responded pretty well. My disease hasn't progressed a lot. So I kind of feel like I benefited from all the people who came before me, whose suffering and whose willingness to be experimented on led to the advent of these incredible drugs that now, for so many of us, have offered us a way back into what we would call, a life where RA isn't dominating. And
Yeah.
so for me, I think, the having that family of people going through it, and then having the ability, the comedy, where, to me, no matter how bad I felt, if I was out laughing for that moment, everything felt normal. And I think when you're sick, all you want is to just feel normal, even if it's only for a
Mhm.
few minutes. Because when you're sick, when you're in pain, it's so hard to take your focus off of that and focus on anything else. And so for me, being out doing comedy every night, which was very fortunately my job, I think was probably one of the most important things of me getting through it.
I love that, dude. And again, I just want to thank you and applaud you for putting it on your shoulder, being a big visual, being a big voice because it's needed. And like I said, my family truly
Well,
thanks you.
Matt,
I
that's
appreciate
something
that.
else too. I think that, so again, when I was diagnosed and I started searching, you read about the textbooks and you'll read about, obviously, people tend to write articles usually about the worst case scenario. And
Right.
so one of the things I wanted to do, and also RA tends to be a disease, it predominantly favors women, and usually women, in their 50s or 60s. There could be
Right.
juvenile RA, and obviously men can get it too. But when you get diagnosed with this and you're like, I don't see anyone like me, even when I went to the
Hmm.
RA meetings, I still felt that, guys in their 30s were kind of underrepresented. And that was one of those chances where I said, I can share my story now so that the next person who gets
Yep.
diagnosed won't feel so alone and go, oh yeah, there's someone like me. And at that point, I was already doing pretty well. And for me, the more I've gotten to do, when I was on Celebrity Apprentice, my cause was the Arthritis Foundation, and we
Yep.
ended up raising $1 million for it. And as important as that, though, was that I got to tell my story. So we raise the money for the research, but also you raise awareness and you let people know, hey, there are a lot of people suffering with this disease. You're not alone. And that's what stuff is. You could be out, your coworker might have the same disease, but because a lot of
Yeah.
people aren't comfortable, they don't want to share their disease. They don't want people to look at them differently. For me, I
Mhm.
just felt like this is a chance to share my story. So that, because it was when I was diagnosed, you're just looking around and just to be able to latch on to somebody and go, okay, they're like me and they're doing
Right.
okay. That gives me hope. I want it to be that for the next person.
And you're doing it well, brother. You're doing it well. So I want to transition a little bit to this comedy world of you, man. So, like, again, huge fan of you forever. Love seeing all of your, I'm going to say your old clips and bits that you post out on YouTube. Dude, like, you're one of the funniest people that I'm not sure the world knows how funny
Well,
Matt
thank you
Iseman
for
is, right?
saying that because I totally agree with you. But it's one of the things like on Ninja Warrior. It's not a very funny show.
Right.
It tends to be very earnest, and so I understand. When I go out and do comedy, not a lot of people go, "Let's go see the host from Ninja Warrior, the really loud guy," because I'm not
Yeah.
particularly funny on the show. But stand up has been my first love. It's what brought me out to Hollywood, and it's something to me. I love TV. I love Ninja Warrior. It's awesome. But
Yeah.
there is something
Yeah.
about being in a room with just you and a microphone and a crowd and that immediacy of you say a joke and people can clap, even if, you can fake clap. Faking laughter is very hard. And so it's kind of
Right.
that response. It's such an honest exchange with you and the audience where if you get them laughing, you've earned it. And to
Mhm.
me, I always say it's such a rush um, doing stand up comedy because I used to be an athlete. I was a college baseball player, not particularly good, but I always think back in sports when Michael Jordan, that game when he hit, I think it was 6 3-pointers in the first half, and he just said, "I was
Exactly.
in a zone." Yeah, he get the
Right.
hands up, and he goes, "The hoop looked like it was the size of a hula hoop. It couldn't go in
Yeah.
it." He just talked about being in that state. And I think, anyone who's worked at something and who's really good at something, we all have those moments when you're like, oh, it's like the Matrix when everything slows down. And I think that's when stand-up comedy is at its best, is when you're on stage and the crowd's laughing and you just feel like it's also you see everything. You know the joke you're telling, you're present to it, but you're thinking about where can I go next and what's happening over here. And it's just to me, it's one of those states where you just feel present because I think
Yeah.
particularly now in life, and I am so bad at this with my phone. I think we all get so distracted. We have a million things beeping at us, buzzing at us, instant ways to distract us. I love when something pulls you fully present. And to me, that's what stand up does, which is why I love it so much.
Dude, and you're great at it, man. You have an amazing gift and talent, and I know you work hard at it. And I wanted to ask you this question because I know when you're doing stand up, right? Like, you've got your routine, you've got your flow that you're going to do over and over again. Are there moments when it's like, all right, I did this in LA and it was like, okay, but then I go do it in Alabama and the crowd erupts. It's the same joke, the same
Oh,
energy. What is that like, man?
it'll happen in the same night. Like if you do two shows, you'll go out, you'll
Yeah.
say a joke, it kills. And you'll go out to the same audience or virtually the same audience in the same
Right.
city and it dies. And that but that's one of the challenges of comedy is
Yeah.
that it's always a high wire act. And that's what we say is, if you ever kind of just go on autopilot where you're like, I know this joke works, I can just tell this, the audience is very perceptive. And if you're not really present, because you're right, you've often told the joke for a decade. You've told the
Right.
same joke, but you're always tweaking it. But
Right.
and so the challenge is to make it feel though like every night is the first time you say it. And that's when you have to be present in the room. And when you're not, when you go on autopilot, and every comic will tell you, we know when we do it. We know when sometimes
Yeah.
you're just like, I'm tired or I'm not feeling, and something happens,
Yeah.
you go down. That's when you feel like the audience slipping away because the audience, they might not articulate it, but they're incredibly intuitive. And one of the things I say is as long as the audience trusts you, as long as they feel safe with you, you can take them anywhere. If
Yeah.
5 jokes in a row go bad, but you don't panic and you're like, I'm setting you up for something, the audience is okay with it. But as soon as you start getting, we call it flop sweat. And I just took a
Yeah.
shower. That's why I'm sweating right now. And I'm so excited to talk to you. But it is that thing when the audience sense fear or when they pity you, then it's dead. So that's one of the great
Yeah.
things with stand up is that your set, your jokes are always a living, breathing organism. There's always room to find something. And that's what we're doing. So with stand up, when I go out, I'll know if everything, I have 45 minutes. These are the jokes I will tell in 45 minutes. But when I go out there, sometimes you're like, something happens and you'll just run with it and you'll just
Hmm.
go. And then you can dip back into your material if you need to, and then something else happens and you can go back out. And my friends and I, we were talking about it, we go, that's when you're being a comedian. That's when
Yeah.
you're not just saying your material. That's when you're being funny. You're in a room the same way you do with your friends, where you're commenting on something, you
Hmm.
got something else comes up. You don't ignore it, you play with it, you have fun, but you always know where you're
Yeah.
going. And to me, that's when stand up is at its best. So, there are a lot of right now on the internet, you see a lot of crowd work
Hmm.
because comedians, a joke might take years to develop. And if you put it out online, that joke's kind of gone. But crowd work
Right.
is something that kind of happens that's, based on a night. And you're like, let me just show this so I'm funny. So you come out and see my material. So
Yeah.
that's been
Yeah.
one of the challenges with comedy is with the ubiquity of social media of how do I show people my material or how do I show people I'm funny without then burning all my material. So a lot of people are
Yeah.
doing crowd work and it is fun. It is fun kind of because the audience also senses when something's happened. They tend to know when it's a joke that hey, they might have told that joke before, but when something happens, you're like, guy with the glasses. And it's like, hey, that was because of the guy
Right.
with the glasses. That happened this night. And now you might have
Yeah.
had that joke where anytime there's a guy with glasses, but you make it feel special, you make it feel present. I think that's what stand up is. You always want to make it feel new.
Yeah. And that's why I appreciate your art, man. And I was talking to a pretty famously well-known comedian. I won't say their name, but it's funny that you mentioned going on autopilot because this person said to me, like, Mick, I had to go back in the lab because my 45-minute set, I did 2 nights in a row for 30 minutes. And it was like I was just in a flow. I wasn't really
Yeah.
connecting with the audience. And then I had to go, another point that you just made, I had to go to crowd work because I knew at least I could go do that. And so now they're working on perfecting their crowd work so that they've got new material
Yeah.
every time because the audience changes. So you're spot on with that, brother.
It
Spot on.
is, and that's one of the things that I love about stand up is it is a bucking bronco. You can ride it, you can be on it, but at any second you can get thrown off, and that's part of the
Yeah.
rush. I think that we love about it is one of those things that forces you not to just kind of go through it because I went to see a Vegas show and it was a very very famous magician
Mm.
who'd been on TV, who'd done everything, and I watched him and I just saw him magic. And I was just like, this guy has done this for 23 years, and there's no magic left in his performance. He was
Yeah.
just hitting the numbers. And you're like, wow, that's the challenge. Like especially when you have like a residency in Vegas where you may be doing 10, 12 shows a week, the real challenge as a great performer is how do you make each one feel like it's the first time you've done it? How do you make a Tuesday matinee show still feels special. And
Right.
that's I think those are the really great performers
Yeah.
are the ones who can do that.
Yeah. So another thing I want to congratulate you on, brother, was winning Celebrity Apprentice in your season, your year. You were kicking names or kicking butts, taking
Yeah.
names, right? What's a leadership lesson that you learned throughout Celebrity Apprentice that maybe you didn't know until you were on?
I think I've played sports, been on some shows that were, network shows and things. I think the interesting thing with that was probably the biggest collection of people, alphas, people with big egos, people who might not have
Hmm.
been, at the top of their games success wise, but people who'd been Hall of Fame NFL players, world champion boxers, like, superstars, heads of bands that were, had sold 100 million albums. You're around these
Yeah.
people, and especially as someone coming in, I was probably one of the lesser known people. I think it was a chance to really say, all right, I got to swallow my ego here and see what do I need to do to get people on the same page. And what I
Right.
found was one of those things that when you didn't make it about your ego, when you didn't make if someone challenged you, make it like, hey, this is a maneuver going, all right, well, what's your idea? Let me hear you. it was one of those things that when I sought for collaboration, I found that was how I managed a lot of the egos. Now, the great thing about it was, for those who don't know, I was on with the new boss, Arnold Schwarzenegger. The old boss had
Yeah.
moved on to a different job. And unfortunately, I won. I'm the new Celebrity Apprentice. The show got canceled because of the political connections to it. The day
Wait, it
after,
wasn't because you won? It didn't
well,
get
it
canceled
may
because
be,
Matt
but
won?
I'm going to say it was because of the political stuff. But what was great was when the show was canceled that day, I was literally standing in an airport and I saw the text after I won. And it's like, NBC announces Celebrity Apprentice is canceled. And right then I got a call from Arnold Schwarzenegger and he's like, Izzy, I just want you to know you're still my apprentice. In 2 weeks, we're going to Columbus, Ohio. And like since then, that was in 2017. Since then, I've traveled the world with this guy. I've gotten to be up close. And to me, Mick, that has been like business school, graduate school, the school of hard, like being around someone who I think is one of one, but certainly in my generation, I can't think of many people who've had the amount of worldwide fame, the amount of success in so many different areas, from bodybuilding to real estate to movies to politics to philanthropy to climate change. To be in his orbit has been such a lesson in leadership and seeing how he does it, because he has me host this Austrian World Summit on Climate Change that's held in the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, their version of the White House. I'm up
Yeah.
there hosting with world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, leaders of billion-dollar companies. Arnold puts me up there, and I watch this, and there's no question with all those people in the room that Arnold is the biggest person in the room. But the thing I love about him is he never makes it a contest about measuring the size of your manhood. With Arnold, he's the guy, he's building everyone else up. Everyone who comes in, oh, it's so great to see you here, Prime Minister Van der Bellen. It's so great to have you here. It's incredible what you're doing. And he makes you feel appreciated and he makes you feel valued. And when I watch his style of leadership, I've worked with him now for going on almost a decade. And every time I do something, this is it. He writes me a letter. He'll write me a letter that gets there the day or two after saying thank you. When he's up on stage, he'll say, it's so amazing having Matt Iseman host and Monica Langtoller planning this. You're the best planner in the world. He builds everyone up. And Mick, in this era when we see people, the leaders who have to push people down or smash them down or remind them, I'm the leader. What a breath of fresh air it is to see someone who instead builds everyone up. And in so doing, lifts us all up and himself too. And it's, to me, when I see his style of leadership, I think that's someone who moves the needle in such a significant way in so many different areas.
I love that, dude. I love that. Matt, I normally start my conversations by asking my guest what their because is,
Yeah.
right? But I needed to talk to you about being my hero and why. And so that was really important for me. But now I do want to ask you, Matt, like all the things that you do in life, all the goodness that you bring forward, what's your because? And for me, your because is that thing that's deeper than your why,
Yeah.
right? Like I could guess your why, but your because is really the fuel that makes everything happen. So for Matt Iseman, man, what's your because?
So, because I know that's your question and I've been thinking about that. And when I went into being a doctor, the idea was I want to help people. And then when I left medicine and got into stand-up comedy, it was kind of hard because like, hey, you were directly helping people and now you're out there being the center of attention. But the thing I think I realized was growing up, as I looked at it, I like to make people feel good. I'm a pleaser. I don't like conflict. I had a brother. We'd fight. I never wanted to fight. I always would. That's why I got into comedy. Let me laugh. Let me diffuse people. I think the thing was I want to make people feel happy. Um, and that's always kind of been my nature. I think, like, with Ninja Warrior, it's so great we found a show where, Wipe Out's a show when people fall, you can laugh. On our
Mm-hmm.
show, when people fall, even if it's on the very first obstacle, we don't laugh. We say, you know what? It took a lot of courage just to get here and a lot of effort. And,
Yeah.
whether you make it all the way or just one step, you still put yourself out there. You still risk something. And you go back to that awesome Teddy Roosevelt speech about the man in the arena. That's the one who
Yeah.
deserves the credit, not the people online sniping at you or tearing you down. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, my because is I always have had this need to want to make people feel good, to feel better. And I thought with medicine I was going to do it that way, and I realized, well, I'm not going to be a brain surgeon or a heart surgeon. Instead, I'm going to do it through my words, through my actions, through shows like
Yeah.
Ninja Warrior, or through my comedy, where my comedy for the most part is very goofy. For the most part, I'm the butt of the joke. I always remember when I started out doing comedy, my mom and grandma came to some shows. And the thing they both said, well, a lot of comics would go up and they would do crowd work and they would rip on people. And my mom always sat in the back because she just thought, oh, I would feel so terrible if someone picked on me at a show. And I just thought, yeah, that's great. And some people love it. I mean, Don Rickles was the best. It's great.
Yeah.
But for me, who I am, I never wanted to do that because, we all remember at some point when you're being picked on. And I thought, I never liked that. Instead, I liked the idea of, hey, we can laugh together, but in the end, I want it to be like, I'm going to put my arm around you and we're going to walk out of here laughing, kind of, nudging
Yeah.
each other like we're friends.
Yeah.
If it's like a roast to me, I did a roast once of Dennis Rodman. Now there's an easy target. I met him that night and I'm going up on stage and the thought behind every joke was I wanted to go, hey, Dennis, this is just a joke. Like, that, but it was just so critical to me. I'm like, I don't want this guy up here going, man, does this guy hate me? And that's
Right.
part of my personality. I think that for better or worse impacts how I do comedy. But it's something for me. I think my because is when I do stuff, by and large, I want it to make people feel better. I think that's when I leave a show and people are smiling, or when we do Ninja Warrior and you get texts or emails or people saying, man, that show was fun and we loved what you said about us or how you celebrated us. I'm like, that's it. I think my because is ultimately I guess I'm a glorified hype man, Mick. That's my because.
Hey, and you do it great, brother. And you touch a lot of lives. You make the reason I call you the soul of American Ninja Warrior, and you can tell Akbar I said it to you, but it's because you're pure, right? Like who Matt Iseman is who you are, and that's seen through. So even for people that don't personally know you, they know you.
Yeah.
And I think that truly aligns with what you're because.
Well, it's funny. I think that's one thing that we really got. I don't know if it's luck or if they knew it intentionally, but when we started, Akbar and I think both kind of share that sensibility. And he's a guy, obviously played in the NFL. His brother was an all-pro, 9 years at Green Bay. And Akbar always said, I was a journeyman. I was a guy, I bounced around from team to team to team. I was never a star. I always had to work for everything. And he goes, when I see these ninjas out here, the ones who are struggling getting by, the ones who maybe haven't hit a buzzer, he goes, that was me. And he's like, that's me. That's the guy I want to celebrate. And I think we're both like that, of having played sports and having, attempted physical things, particularly in an arena with thousands of people watching and on TV with millions at home watching. There's something about anyone who has the courage, particularly for these people who aren't professional athletes. For the most of them, they have families and jobs, and they're doing this once a year. They're putting themselves out there. And I just have so much respect for that, because like Celebrity Apprentice, that's we did Lip Sync Battle and RuPaul's Drag Race, where you're out there being judged, but it's something on Ninja Warrior where it really is you versus the course. And I'm so appreciative that there are people who are like, I'm willing to go for this glory, knowing that, a fall is part of it. And that's one of the cool things with our show is we're heading into season 18 is, we've had seasons where people have fallen. We had a guy, Kyle Schulze, I think it was 8 seasons he tried. And finally, last season, he got his first ever buzzer. And, we've had thousands of buzzers, but that was his first buzzer. And that was a moment none of us will forget because of all the hard work, because of the failures that came before it. And that's what's great with the show that's gone on this long, is we get to see these story arcs. We get to see people who came in here as little kids who are now married with their own kids doing ninja. And it's really cool to see this kind of full circle and see this community and family that's developed from it.
I love it, brother. I love it, brother. Matt, I want to give my quick, I usually do a quick 5. I'm going to do a quick 4 because I want the last one for you to tell people about all the cool things you have going on. So quick 5, rapid fire. Recently married.
Yes.
I saw the dance moves.
That was
who's the better
dance we did. Well, we came down the aisle to This Is Me, and then our first dance was to Faithfully, and we did interpretive dance, which
yes
was a bold choice, I will say.
So, who's the better dancer, you or Akbar?
Uh, Akbar. Not by much,
Dang
though.
it.
We are both awful, but he's bigger than me, so I'm going to say his name so he doesn't beat me up next time.
All right. Your favorite comfort food?
Chicken tenders with honey mustard sauce. Ugh. My wife.
See, wifey, Marcy, Matt eats chicken tenders too.
Ugh.
Like so our wedding a couple of years ago, everybody has steak and chicken and salmon. I wanted chicken tenders. I was like, just give me chicken
We
tenders.
had chicken tenders late night, and I was so happy. That was my wife was like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yes, I am."
See, we have so much in common, dude. So much in common. Your most favorite book that you've read?
What jumps to mind? I got to go back. I'm going to go back to the Chronicles of Narnia because I think those were the first books I remember. And because there were a series of them, they drew me into reading. Those books I
Okay.
remember like giving me the passion to read when I just couldn't wait to put one down. And it was just such good storytelling. And there's so many since then. I think uh, so many incredible books. I just read, a fascinating book I just read was the book on Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson, the biography, where, Elon's such an obviously charged figure right now. But just when you see what it takes, I think, anytime someone operates at a very high level, like Musk does, running so many companies, I think you want to know how do they do it. And when you see the way he lives, you're like, oh, that is something I couldn't do. The drive there, but it's fascinating. The same thing with Schwarzenegger, where I think when you have an opportunity to glean the insights from these people who operate at a level that is, the super rare stratosphere. To me, I love learning about that.
I love it. All right, last one. If Matt's playlist comes on, music playlist, what's the one song that you immediately lose your mind to, and no matter
Any
what's
Way
going
You
on?
Want It by Journey.
There you go.
I love Journey, and that's Any Way You Want It. It's like it's a happy song. It's a song about potential. It's amazing.
Love it, brother. And then the last question, Matt, is what do you have going on now and where can people find and follow you?
So Akbar and I just shot a little travel show called Extra Mile Club. It's going to be coming out in October. I've got some corporate gigs coming up. We're going to be Ninja Warrior, the season 17. We're heading into the final stretch. I think we've got 6 episodes left, season 17.
Love it, love it, love it. I'll make sure we have links everywhere in the show notes and descriptions. Matt, brother, I know how busy you are, but like I said in the beginning, truly honored that my hero could come on. What you mean to not just me, but my family and everyone that's struggling or suffering with arthritis, man. Like, just truly love you, brother. From
Well,
the bottom of my
thank you,
soul.
and I hope they're doing well. Godspeed.
You got it. And to all the viewers and listeners, remember, your because is your superpower. Go unleash it.